It is the 26th of March, 1997. A server room in the Pentagon's Defense Information Systems Agency, Arlington, Virginia. A systems administrator runs a routine audit. One line in the access log doesn't belong. This is the story of how a teenager broke into the most secured military computer network on Earth, twice. His name was Ehud Tenenbaum. He was 18 years old and living in a suburb north of Tel Aviv. He called himself the Analyzer. In Israel in the late 1990s, the internet was still a frontier, fast enough to be useful, loose enough to be dangerous. Tenenbaum had been navigating it since he was 15. By 17, he had developed a method, not brute force, patience. He would map a target's network architecture over weeks, identify a misconfigured server sitting at the edge of the system, exploit it, and use it as a bridge into the interior. Clean, methodical. He left almost nothing behind. The Pentagon was not his first target. He had already been inside Harvard University's network, MIT, the Israeli parliament, the Knesset. In early 1998, Tenenbaum began probing the Defense Information Systems Agency. DISA manages the communications infrastructure for the entire United States military. Its servers carry logistics data, personnel files, and sensitive operational communications. At the time, it had approximately 10,000 networked systems. Tenenbaum found a vulnerability in a Sun Microsystems server running an outdated version of a remote access protocol. The patch had been available for 4 months. Nobody had applied it. He was inside in under 2 hours. What he found was not nuclear launch codes. It was not troop movements or classified weapons schematics. What he found was far more useful to an 18-year-old with no political agenda and no ideology. Access. Deep, lateral, almost limitless access to systems that connected outward to other systems. He moved through the network methodically, documenting what he found, mapping connections. He returned over the following weeks. Each session lasted between 40 minutes and 2 hours. He was careful. He covered his tracks. He was not the only one in there. 2 American teenagers had followed Tenenbaum into the DISA network. They were 16 and 17 years old, from California and Massachusetts, respectively. They called themselves Machiavelli and Too Short. They were not careful. They left fragments everywhere. On the 25th of February 1998, a DISA analyst flagged the anomaly. Within 24 hours, the FBI, the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, and the National Security Agency were all working the same thread. Deputy Secretary of Defense John Hamre addressed the press. He called it the most organized and systematic attack the Pentagon had ever seen. The investigation was given a name: Operation Solar Sunrise. For 11 days, the public believed the intrusion might be the work of a foreign state. The timing was not good. The United States was in a tense standoff with Iraq over weapons inspections. The possibility that Baghdad had found a way inside the Pentagon's network was not dismissed by anyone with a clearance. Emergency meetings were held. Threat assessments circulated at the highest levels of the Defense Department. It was 2 teenagers from California. Machiavelli and Too Short were identified within 2 weeks. The FBI traced their sessions through a chain of proxy servers back to their home IP addresses. Both were minors. Both cooperated. Both were prosecuted under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. But the thread did not end there. The American teenagers told investigators they had learned the technique from someone online. A mentor, a figure who had handed them the entry point and the method like a set of keys. They knew him only by his handle: the Analyzer. The FBI contacted Israeli authorities. The Shin Bet, Israel's internal security service, began their own parallel investigation. Tenenbaum was not difficult to find. He was not hiding. He was still online, still working, still moving through networks he had no authorization to enter. In March of 1998, Israeli police raided his family's apartment in Petah Tikva. They found 2 computers, dozens of floppy disks, and notebooks filled with handwritten network maps. Tenenbaum was arrested. He was 18 years old. The Israeli government was in a complicated position. Tenenbaum was a citizen. Extraditing him to the United States would set a precedent nobody wanted to set. But declining to prosecute him would strain a critical alliance at a delicate moment. The compromise was a domestic prosecution. In 2001, Tenenbaum pled guilty in an Israeli court to charges of unauthorized computer access and conspiracy. He received an 18-month suspended sentence and 500 hours of community service. He did not serve a single day in prison. In the United States, the reaction was controlled fury. Pentagon officials quietly acknowledged that the Solar Sunrise intrusions had exposed structural failures in their network security posture. Hundreds of servers across DISA and affiliated military networks had been running unpatched software for months. The vulnerability Tenenbaum exploited was not exotic. It was not a 0-day. It was negligence. An 18-year-old with patience and a dial-up connection had found it first. The fixes came fast. DISA launched an internal audit. New patching protocols were mandated across all Department of Defense networks. The Pentagon stood up what would eventually become U.S. Cyber Command, a dedicated military organization for cyber operations and defense. Tenenbaum, in a way that nobody would officially acknowledge, had stress-tested the system and found it hollow. Then he did it again. In 2008, 10 years after Operation Solar Sunrise, Canadian authorities arrested Ehud Tenenbaum in Calgary. The charges were not hacking. They were fraud. Tenenbaum had allegedly been part of a criminal operation that compromised the point-of-sale systems of several North American restaurant chains and stole credit card data from approximately 1.5 million customers. The total estimated value of the fraud was $10 million. He was extradited to the United States, the extradition that had been avoided a decade earlier, and faced federal charges in a New York district court. In 2012, he pled guilty. He was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, followed by supervised release. He served the time. He was released. What followed is murkier. Tenenbaum gave a small number of interviews in the years after his release, some in Hebrew, some in English. He spoke about the solar sunrise intrusions with a detachment that read less like remorse and more like a man describing a job he had done competently. He had found the door open. He had walked through it. He had documented what was inside. The Pentagon had then closed the door and built a better one. From a certain angle, that is a reasonable description of what happened. Cybersecurity professionals who followed his career noted that the techniques Tenenbaum pioneered in 1997 and 1998 were essentially the blueprint for what is now called advanced persistent threat intrusion. The slow, methodical, long-duration infiltration of hardened networks that nation-state hacking groups would later industrialize. He was doing it at 18 with hardware that would struggle to run a modern web browser. The Department of Defense has never publicly confirmed the full scope of what Tenenbaum accessed during his weeks inside the DISA network. The official position is that no classified information was compromised. What was accessed, they said, was unclassified but sensitive. The distinction matters legally. Whether it matters operationally is a different question, one that has never been fully answered in public. Every network that has ever been called secure has eventually had someone walk through it the same way he did, quietly, methodically, leaving almost nothing behind. The door Tenenbaum found in 1998 was patched. The next one was found by someone else, and the one after that. Every network that has ever been called secure has eventually had someone walk through it the same way he did, quietly, methodically, leaving almost nothing behind. The last confirmed location for Ehud Tenenbaum is a matter of public record. After his release, he returned to Israel.